Once again, sincere congratulations to Monica. Monica, I'm not sure you have noticed, but you already are making a significant impact. And now that we have started on a slightly personal note, allow me to add just one more personal address, this time from me, our speakers, Małgorzata Wypych, CEO at Mental Health Center. Happy birthday, Małgosia. And now let's jump right into today's program. We are ready with the speakers for the first discussion, gender balance as a business strategy. What a topic. We have with us to talk about it, Suneeta Shetty, Center Director, GSC Poland and Global Head of Transaction Monitoring Operations at HSBC. Welcome, Suneeta. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, I can. Thank you very much.
We're also joined by Helen Stewart, Luxoft, HR Director, Western Europe. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Last, Christopher Weber-Fürst, CEO, Diversity and Global Female Executive Coach at FemaleFuture. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
And let's start with the obvious warm-up question. Consider it before tougher ones, and that would be, why is so much space still devoted to the topic of gender balance? We're in 2021. This is something we should be taking for granted, should we not? Who would like to start?
I can. Much has been said, I agree with you, but I don't think enough has been done. We are in 2021 and gender inequality in almost all spheres of influence is still a grim reality. The past decades, of course, have seen important progress for women. However, change has been uneven and incremental. At the current rate of change globally, the gender gap will not close for another 100 years, and that's what's been computed by the UN. Most of the significant improvements, particularly in the business space, like women on boards and women in tech, have taken place in countries that have either serious legislative action, have strong political will, and or have some intensive public debate on the issue. But that may not necessarily be true in all the other markets. My own instance, if you take, I'm an Indian woman who's worked across some of the biggest cities in Asia and in Eastern Europe, and several countries still have some very archaic laws that materially restrict a woman's ability to make decisions about marriage, divorce, property, domestic violence, child custody, or limit her choices about getting a job or applying for a job, starting a business, among others. Anecdotally, in my own experience in some of the cities that I listed out, I cannot sponsor my own children. I need my husband to sign off on the visa application papers. Neither can I start my own business or employ people without a no objection certificate from my husband.
I know it's a reality, but nevertheless, one which is so surreal in today's world. And yet, so many women experience this reality. Can we now go to Helen? Helen, would you like to make an opening comment to our opening question?
Yeah, I think Suneeta's raised some really, really valid points. I think, we all know the reality. Yeah, and I think we all know that gender equity is super important, but I don't think we've achieved that yet. And I think, we only have to look at the report that came out from Lego a couple of weeks ago, where it was talking about the inequality between gender play, and that girls are more open to playing across, different gender toys, etc., whereas there's still some bias for boys. And so I think it's throughout our society, and I still think we have to talk about it vocally and with confidence that this is something that still needs to change.
I try and avoid sharing my personal views during this conference, but think about male-female equality. This is something that is so powerful inside me on an emotional and rational level that I find it difficult to believe that you can call yourself a mature civilization if you don't understand a concept which is rationally so fundamental as this. Quite honestly, Christopher.
Well, when we talk about gender, I think we immediately think about women, but it also includes men. I mean, the definition of gender is how we psychologically identify ourselves with our psychological female and masculine sides. So that's an important part. And particularly now, these days, after the lockdown and pandemic, where people are going back to work, saying we don't want to work in the old way, we want to work in a new way, which really is an important question to discuss. How will diversity and inclusion work in this new paradigm? And also, I think we have to look at it from a scientific point of view. McKinsey has just recently published an article called "Diversity Always Wins." So why is diversity and inclusion so important? The companies, organizations that take this really serious, they do it the right way, the strategic right way. I mean, we're talking about gender as a business strategy. It is a part of a long-term sustainable strategy, which means that the whole organization is included, and particularly the CEO, whether he is a he or a she, is totally take the full responsibility of sponsorship for the whole program. And I think many organizations, they are not really aware of the advantages of diversity and inclusion done the right way, which we might discuss later in this debate.
We are talking here about diversity, inclusion, also equality, but would you agree that with Suneeta's opening words, we are actually talking about freedom, and that's still far from equality, isn't it? Because when someone else needs to sign off a formal document allowing you to do something, I mean, what is it? Where are we? How mature is that? Quite honestly, we're not talking about children here, we're talking about adults. So what are we talking about here?
I think for us...
I mean we're talking about a global challenge here, because, and I mean, I come from Norway, and I must say we are the world champions when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And so to hear what you are, Shetty, in India, where it's a totally different paradigm. So you know, we're discussing on totally different levels here. So I would really like to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah. And how do we separate, now that you've mentioned that, Christopher, you're absolutely right. It's a global discussion, global challenges. How do we separate the discussion of leadership from female leadership? These are, I mean, there's leadership. There's no need to separate male-female leadership. Either you're qualified what it takes to be an effective leader, or you don't. Can you comment on that? Suneeta, can we go back to you?
Thank you. Slightly controversial, my answer, but I think the need of the hour is to still emphasize whether it's male leadership or female leadership. Not doing so does not address the elephant in the room. And why not? The male-female equation is the most basic one, and one that in theory should be a simplistic one to address. There are countries that have done exponentially well. Chris has just mentioned Norway, for example. But then there are countries, Eastern Europe, we know, Central Asia, Southeastern Asia, where if you don't specify female leadership, or you don't sponsor female talent, and you don't constantly emphasize the female aspect of it, it never gets done, because it's never a prerogative. It's never a business prerogative, never a political prerogative. For example, just 62% of women globally are in the labor force, compared to 93% of men. That answers the question, I would think.
That figure is, you know, from the very beginning of this discussion, with our first question, I knew that my phone would start vibrating in a moment. That means that the studio is sending me our audience questions. So in a moment, I'm going to start asking. But before I do, let me come back to the topic of our discussion: gender balance as a business strategy. Can you think of many companies that implement projects in the area of gender balance as part of their business strategy? Yes. How is it part of their business strategy? Who would like to address that one? Maybe Helen.
Well, I just a short comment, because I read this morning that Accenture just published a report during the pandemic, they have had special strategic focus on gender equality. And I quote here, they have now made new rounds of promotion to celebrate extraordinary contributions during extraordinary times, which has to do with, they promote women. So the extraordinary results has to do with their promoting more women. And then the strategy to do that has to do with a lot of things, but particularly recruiting and promoting.
So how is gender balance strategic? Thank you, Christopher. Helen, could you address this one?
I think gender balance has to be strategic. It's about us creating that diversity of thought that we need in our organisations to spark creativity and innovation. And if we just take one side of the gender equation, we're not getting a balanced view, we're not getting those creative opportunities to hear. And so I think that, you know, building it out into a business strategy, ensuring that we understand that, you know, our organizations are built on profitable solutions, and having people that create those is so important. So by bringing together that diversity, by building it in and having it as part of our business case, actually in our business drivers, I think is absolutely fundamental to how we run our businesses. So I think sometimes what can happen in organizations is we limit to being a female issue or a gender issue. It's actually a business issue. And I think that the sooner that we help our business leaders understand this is a business issue, this is about building a profitable organization using the diverse opportunity to access to talent, I think the sooner we can all move forward faster, I think.
Helen, Christopher, Suneeta, allow me to take the liberty of teasing, provoking you a little more in that direction. I would imagine you will find quite a number of companies, or specifically male leaders, who would still think, you know, having more women on our, we call it headcount lists, how impersonal is that, by the way, is actually creates more problems potentially for us, because there will be more maternity leaves, etc., etc. We have a separate discussion, by the way, about men in care, which is a new dimension to station. But still, would you agree that we cannot take it for granted that gender balance is part of business strategy for many people? Quite to the contrary in their way of thinking. And by the way, we already have 5 questions from our audience. So who would like to address this one?
If I'm able to, I think this has really been highlighted by the pandemic. Overnight, we all had to become about delivery and output, something that we've been talking about for such a long time, where, you know, previously management styles have been about office presenteeism. I think what the pandemic has helped us do is highlight the actual effectiveness of flexible working patterns, how some of us have had to manage family lives, but we've still had to deliver on our job roles, and how organisations are still profitable, they still have output. So I actually think from such a terrible situation, we've actually been able to turn something into an opportunity. And I think we now need to keep building on that opportunity by creating those new work styles and creating those new workplaces.
So let us start, thank you, Helen. Let us start with some of those questions that we are getting from the audience. Our audience members could ask some of those questions even before the debate, so let me start with these. With all the effort put in place in terms of gender balance, what should companies do to avoid perception of reverse discrimination? That's question 2. How to support female leaders to pop up in their career ladder? Creative ideas might be lost to the world without even listening to them. How to support within working environment might be brainwash and giving opportunities. Anyone?
I can take the first one.
Yes.
I think we've got to be very cautious in the corporate space that as we demonstrate our enthusiasm to get the male-female ratio right across various levels up the corporate ladder, we never should compromise on the environment of meritocracy. Because the minute you compromise that and then you have a very quota-based outlook, that's when the spirit of it just falls apart. And the last thing you want when a woman leader is placed in her position is for the environment around her to be hostile against her and say, oh, hey, you know what, you got this role because there was a quota to fill. That's the last thing in the world that you'd want for a candidate like that. And you've set that person up for failure. So as a corporate, we've got to be very deliberate, very conscious, and very delicate about ensuring that our environment of meritocracy remains. It has to be skills-based. It has to be experience-based. It has to be knowledge, tenure, experience-based, no matter what. And then you somehow very consciously try and address the gender gap, but never at the compromise of merit.
So what you're saying, Suneeta, is never forget that this game is ultimately credibility and authenticity, reliability even, the trust that you should have in the organization as someone who offers jobs to people who qualify best to the actual job descriptions.
That's right.
Fair enough. Thank you.
And if you look at it from a more strategic point of view, referring to this report from McKinsey, the organizations that are strategically doing this in the right way, as we have been talking about, their return on investment is 12% higher as their competitors. So organizations that are not taking advantage of this opportunity is actually just ridiculous. And I think one of the challenges is for business owners and executives to really understand the importance of including female leaders and also diversity in general into their corporations, which has to do with innovation, which has to do with better decisions. And from my experience as a leadership coach for women, I must say that my particular point is to coach female executives or female leaders anyway, to be able to take a stand on when they come back to the organization on how not to lose yourself in a male environment. Because the traditional organization is really so male-oriented towards individual performance, which does not really fit into the female values of working better together.
That's a very interesting. Thank you, Christopher. Helen, would you like to comment before we go to the next two questions?
Yeah, I think there's something fundamental here for me about how we work together. And I think meritocracy absolutely is key and authenticity is key. But I think there's something that we need to help our talent, our female talent in the organization be, which is braver. I think typically they won't go for opportunities that they don't feel confident or they don't feel ready for. Whereas I think our male allies will typically be braver. So I think it's about asking everyone in the organization to sort of encourage and allow opportunity to push yourself beyond your boundaries, you know, take on new challenges. And so some of that fundamental opportunity will build that meritocracy, because it's about then proving that you have that opportunity to deliver and showcase your talent. So I think that's important for me in this situation.
Thank you very much, Helen. Questions from our audience. We've touched on the first one already, but I think we can add definitely to this question. We know working mothers have been hugely impacted by the pandemic. How might a focus on supporting and this group actually benefit all women? That's question one. And then we get a question from Antoni. It may sound a little convoluted, but I hope you will understand what is meant here. Why should men get in engaging in accelerating leadership? Who would like to address those? I can try and paraphrase the second question if you like.
I can take this.
Please, Chris.
I believe it's like
I would like to answer the second one that has to do with men, because we know from research in Norway that if men engage, the world just get a better place. The marriage functions much better, the children function much better, less problems. It's just like surfing on the wave that is never ending. And it's not so. It's good for the family. It's good for the kids. It's good for school. It's good for the whole system. It's good for creating a democratic workplace, because the organizations that also take this very serious, they get much more attractive to to attract both female and male talents, because they want to work in an environment where businesses take care of this. So particularly now these days with recruiting, there's a war for talent, and we know that from Norway. Organizations that take this very serious are highly attractive as an employer.
Very important voice here. Anyone else would like to comment?
I would just take I think when we talk about working mothers, I think actually we need to talk about working families. And I think if we're going to create that balance in the workplace, we actually have to talk about how we support working families and how we give them opportunities. So including our fathers, how do we give them the opportunity and give them the accountability to be able to go and be fathers in the home? So I think actually when we start to talk about working mothers, I think that's too siloed for me personally. I think we have to talk about the broader aspect of creating that balance in society, which is what Christopher's touched on. So I think it's a full spectrum, it's a holistic approach to how we support our families.
And Helen, I'll have to agree with you there, because every time we say single mother, working mother, mother-friendly facilities, I think it's very alienating for men and for fathers in particular. So we've made a very conscious effort in the HSBC workplace to make sure that our flexible working arrangements, our staggered working hours are gender neutral, right? You could be a single parent, or you don't even have to be a parent. You could be a carer, and you need flexible working arrangements. You've got older parents to take care of, or siblings that need to be taken care of, right? Fair performance management policies, maternity and paternity leave that's equal, childcare allowances, childcare facilities, single parent allowances. Those are the kind of things that would not alienate men. And to Chris's point, you engage them then, and you give them the right equipment, and you've sort of enabled them to be a part of the conversation as opposed to putting them on the other side of the fence.
Absolutely. Suneeta, just like the term female leaders is somewhat defensive in principle, isn't it? But of course, I agree with your point that we are not yet there, and we need to continue those references. Every time I feel that I've just asked you 2 questions and therefore I have 2 left, 3 more turn up. So let me try and catch up on our list of questions for you. Tomasz is asking, many companies projects in the area of, more questions, in the area of gender balance, but will we say, or when will we say that it is part of a business strategy? So conducting projects on the one hand, that's something that is already granted, but when do we communicate it as business strategy?
I'm okay to take that. We've been very bold in that space, and we have now made it a part of our very conscious business strategy. So for most of us now, we've got goals and people KPIs that need to be met. Our seniors are dead serious about it. And we've got to get into some very uncomfortable conversations to explain why we haven't been able to meet our KPIs. To Chris's point, it's a war on talent out there. So that tightrope on meeting your gender KPIs while addressing your talent requirements continues to exist. But hey, nobody expected it to be simple. What we want to do and what we've been now very serious about in terms of our policy is to start from the bottom of the pyramid, make sure it's organic growth, whether it's male or female alike. And then somewhere in middle management, we see that a segment of our female talent tend to drop off on account of domestic responsibilities. So how do we engage them and create that safety net and bring them back into the pyramid? So those are the things we're putting some conscious thought to. We've got some key deliverables in that space over the next couple of years, but we'd like to believe that this is now a serious part of our strategy and not something that we can afford to ignore anymore, to be frank.
Anyone else?
Well, I don't think one can afford not to. Because the ones who are not taking it serious, they will probably not exist as an organization in the next 10 or 15 years. So it has to be part of a business strategy, or else you will be out of business. Is that important?
Your comment, Christopher, I believe is conclusive enough for my question. So let me ask two more questions. The next one is almost all in a discussion like that. What do you think about gender parity, for example, in recruitment, advancing women? And the next one from Carolina. Have you come across a narrative of equality of outcome versus equality of opportunities? What are your views around it?
So I'll take the gender parity question in talent attraction. I think, we have to go back to earlier when we talk about meritocracy. I think for credibility purposes, we have to ensure that we have the right talent accessing the right roles. And I think one of the things we have to make sure is that we actually go out actively into the marketplace and look for talent that may need to flourish, who perhaps haven't been put, I keep talking about pushing people out of their comfort zones, pushing them into sort of challenging situations. People have potential. And I think that females need to understand, and I think this is something that organizations to help understand, is you can sometimes go into an uncertain situation and you will flourish. And I think we have to give them that opportunity. And I think sometimes we need to make our talent attraction practices pull that potential out. So we need to be able to identify the potential and push people forward for roles they particularly may not have applied for before.
This takes me back to our closing discussion yesterday about disabilities and lack of confidence being one of the important factors. Likewise with women, there's this, call it a stereotype if you like, there's this general belief that men tend to be overconfident, where women tend to be more realistic in assessing or even lack confidence in assessing the probability of getting a role or being good at it. So that's definitely an important factor, isn't it? An important question. Anyone would like to, the other one, equality of outcome versus equality of opportunities. Have you come across this distinction? If not,
I have. I have, but then it feeds back to my earlier answer around making sure that you've got gender neutral and fair people KPIs in the corporate world across various stages of engagement. So right from recruitment to selection to onboarding to ensuring there's enough talent growth, diversity of thought. So it's opportunity at the start of the chain, and then it's outcome at various points in the chain. We'll never get to a point where we can say there's parity on both sides, but the aim is to at least gun for it.
Thanks,
Can I comment on that too?
We've got three. Yes, Christopher.
Because I think there's a really artificial divide between when you go to work, you're employed, and when you go off work, you are unemployed, so to say. So to bring your whole self to work as a whole person, I think would really benefit the way that we think about ourselves in the context of working together. And I think that will be also a paradigm shift in an organization where they start regarding how can we really work with inclusion as a father, as a mother. And we know that from experience in Norway, when the family or the mother says, well, I love to work here, but I have to work this way. And our experience since we introduced the 40% female quota in 2003, the CEO says, yeah, of course, do it. What's the problem? And that really makes a huge difference in how attractive working place is.
You remind me yet again of how important the language we use is, the terminology, the division lines. If it were consolation, Christopher, yesterday we had a very interesting discussion around that, and one of our speakers used a reference, a cultural reference really, a country where if you happen to be a 30 plus will not have a husband, there's a term for you, and the term is loosely translated as a leftover woman. How flattering is that? I mean,
market value.
Two more questions, and we've run out. So if we can just make a quick comment to those two. Sylvia, how to react on such comments in the organizations like, we should hire based on skills, not looking at biases around skills. Why do we focus on female? What kind of other questions you receive around this topic in your circle? And how do you respond to influence the change? So that's one question. Another from Antonia, how do we handle with resistance coming both men, women? There's one more, but we don't have time for that, I'm afraid.
I'll take the question on resistance. It's a three-pronged approach in my mind. Engage, exchange, equip. Engage the men. Enable them to overcome bias through habit change. You've got to engage the women as well. To Helen's point that she made earlier, you've got to show them the ability or the possibilities, the art of the possible when they are courageous, when they take those thoughtful gambles. Show them the benefits of thriving in a diverse environment. Exchange. Understanding and listening to reservations, concerns. I can't do this. I don't think I'm capable. She can't do this. She isn't the right fit. Address those. Don't ignore them. Delayering of those comments has to be done very carefully so that the environment of meritocracy is not compromised. The last leg, equip. Help women manage career breaks. They've taken a few years off for motherhood. Allow them to come back. Don't look down on that break on the CV. Creating policies that foster and actively promote, even mandate, diversity, inclusion, and integration, in my view, addresses the equip point. So engage, exchange, and equip.
Thank you, Suneeta. As I said, we've run out of time. One closing sentence from Helen and Christopher, please.
Well, I think the guy asked the wrong question, actually, because what it's all about. When the CEO is wholeheartedly supported the program of this for long-term strategic strategy, these questions, these problems will not arise. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Helen?
And I think from my point of view, Christopher said it, it's the ease of letting these things happen. If someone says, I want to work and I want to be challenged, but I want to work from home and have this flexibility, okay, get it done. And it's about the output, not the presenteeism in office. It's about being open to flexibility and trusting that confident, capable people will deliver.
Thank you very much, Helen. It's Suneeta, Shetty, HSBC, Helen Stewart, Luxoft, and Christopher Weber-Fürst, FemaleFuture. Thank you all for such a great opening to our today's. Have a good day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.